Welcome to Grassroot, Ohio. Conversations with everyday people working on important issues here in Columbus and all around Ohio. I'm Carolyn Harding, and today I'm talking with Christopher Austin, the originator of the petition to take down the statue of Christopher Columbus in front of the Columbus City Hall. Christopher Austin graduated from Otterbein University with a major in theater and received his master's degree in Pastoral and Professional Counseling from Methodist Theological School. He has received awards for his theatrical performances and completed his first feature film, Things Are Tough All Over, directed by local filmmaker Chris Bournea. Christopher has worked in the field of counseling and social work for 6 years and has received recognition and awards for his work in the field. He is active in the Columbus community with the goal of helping people find their voice of empowerment through the arts, volunteering in religious and community outreach, and social activism. Welcome, Chris. Christopher.
That's all right. I'm really happy to be here. You know, sometimes it's new for me too, because I went by Chris till maybe about 2016. And then I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go by Christopher now. And there are people that aren't used to me with that change. So, but you know, it's okay.
Including me. Let's backtrack. On Memorial Day, which was a really tough day in this country. May 25, George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, and was aided and abetted by 3 other officers. And since then, there's been no peace in Minneapolis, all over the states, around the world. And here in Columbus, there have been rallies, protest marches daily and nightly. And the Columbus police have used aggression and violence, pepper spray, mace, wooden and rubber bullets, flashbang grenades on those exercising their First Amendment rights. And people are being injured and harmed. A young woman has died from complications after being sprayed by chemical agents. A double amputee protester was roughed up and left on the ground. 3 prominent African-American politicians were pepper sprayed while standing in solidarity with protesters. So during this Black Lives Matter movement, there has been a nationwide demand to remove the statues of perpetrators of racial cruelty, discrimination, and injustice. And here in our city, Columbus, Ohio, Christopher Columbus statues are coming down. So, Christopher, you wrote an online petition to do just this, take down the statue of Christopher Columbus. So let's break this down. In Black Lives Matter, there's a protest, there's policy, there's rallies, there's marches. Why did you focus on the statue?
I focused on this statue because this has been a symbol for decades of oppression here in this very city. This particular statue, it is not a stranger to protest. People have been protesting this when I was a kid, and people have been out there. They protested the Santa Maria that was right there on the river, because we understand the messages that these statues and that these works convey. And while we see in real time someone's life being ended by the police, we see that happening. The entire nation sees that happening. And there is such a public outcry about how unjust this is, yet none of us were alive 6 centuries prior, when Columbus set forth on some islands and decimated an entire population of people. And if we can imagine the outcry of the injustice of a man being killed in broad daylight and how it all made us feel, it's not a hard leap to understand what a great injustice it was for a population to be left to just a couple hundred people left. and for their lives to have been completely disrupted and destroyed, and for their remnant to be just gone from the face of the earth. And knowing this, and knowing how we as people feel when we see other people subjugated and struck down and destroyed before our very eyes, I was sitting here thinking about this. How can we lift up a statue of a person that did this very same thing that we are outraged about today?
So you'd been thinking about this before. So you've thought about this with this actual statue, or the 3 statues that are in Columbus, Ohio,
Yeah.
3 of them. So this is something that is kind of you followed, or you have, unconsciously, subconsciously followed since you were a kid, and you've seen protests. I know that Ruben Garcia Herrera, he was very focused on bringing down that statue as well, and other people. And I have a history of that area, because when I came back from New York as an actor, I produced a show on the Santa Maria.
Oh, you did? I
did. And I was not at all really awake about, the controversy, and I should have been, but I wasn't. And when we opened, it was in the fall, and on Columbus Day, the Native American community and activists came down and protested our show. And it just like, whoa, I listened and I heard, and I realized, whoa, well, I better really do some homework. Right. So that Santa Maria is part of my history and part of my waking up too. So I wasn't thinking about it as far as controversial. I was just believed that, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, So
that's what all of us grew up being taught. We were all taught in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and that poem, and everybody got along, and the Native Americans helped them find food and spice, and everything was nice. And that's the end of the story. We were all taught a false history. And the more we have those moments of awakening, and we start listening, and we start doing some research, and part of my ancestors are indigenous people here in North America. And my grandmother would always tell us stories about one of our ancestors that was on the Trail of Tears, but she was able to escape. Now, I don't know if there were others, because a lot of our records were lost. So I don't know the whole story, but I just know that there was one that that is an ancestor of mine, my grandmother's, that was able to escape. So when I think about the Trail of Tears and Christopher Columbus and all these other statues and monuments to people that moved people and destroyed people and enslaved people and trafficked people and forced them to work, it's very interesting. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday that people of color in America, by and large, have such a very different view of America because of what we grow up with and the messages we receive from an early age. So what you can guess what our experience is when you see the statue of a man that the history is he was responsible for enslaving, raping, pillaging, burning, looting entire groups of people, but they make a statue out of them. Yeah. What does that say about you? As a person of color, what kind of message do you think society is giving you at an early age? I can tell you while I'm talking about it, a lot of people don't remember what their first cartoons were. So, they're like, oh, yeah, maybe I watched Howdy Doody or, Animaniacs or whatever it was.
Bugs Bunny.
I remember Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes. I remember very vividly what my earliest cartoons were. And it was black and white 1930s cartoon of Africans drawn as savages trying to throw a white explorer into a burning pot of water to boil them and eat them alive.
Wow.
And that was my first introduction to cartoons as a kid. So the messages that society is giving to young people is something that we are reckoning with today. And it's in these statues and in these monuments. And the whole thing about it is, why are they in a position of honoring? Why are they in a position of memorializing? And that's what people are really grappling with. The people that don't quite understand, maybe they need to learn some more history, but there's still even denial amongst people that do read the history.
Oh yeah.
And maybe you've encountered people with that kind of denial as well.
I've encountered it, Christopher, and I've also, I've been looking at this too. This whole, Christopher Columbus, quite frankly, it is a really strong piece of art. It's not ugly. It's a strong piece of art. So, and I have history with it, and I was thinking about it, and I was talking with my husband and my daughter. We live in Bexley. It used to be a primarily Jewish community. Not so much anymore, but in a way I was saying, I was kind of like relaying to them some of the things I found out that Christopher Columbus did to these indigenous people. I mean, he dismembered them if they, did something minor. He sold little, young girls as sex slaves. I mean, there's a lot of heinous things that happen. But what I said to them is like, it's like Bexley having a huge statue of Hitler on Main Street and being called Hitler, Ohio. Basically.
Right.
That is, it's like that. It's like, it's so potently for people that have, especially folks with indigenous, that connection with Christopher Columbus, and you as well, and everyone that's been oppressed by, by people that, that are lauded, it's just, I'm beginning to understand. It's like we're always constantly being woken up. When you're white and privileged, you oftentimes don't see, and you have to kind of put your feet in someone else's shoes, or put shoes on that really you get. Yeah. So
this empathy thing that you're referring to, putting yourself in other people's shoes, I think that America, especially over the past few years, has lost a tremendous amount of empathy and understanding, and has embraced this my way or the highway, get out of the way if you don't, if you don't stand for the status quo kind of mentality. And that's what's so upsetting and disturbing, I think, that for so many people, and not just here in America, we're seeing these protests for this all around the world. We're seeing people in England tearing down statues of slave owners and throwing them in the harbor, as a way of rejecting that ideal, as a way of rejecting that type of honoring. There has to, people in Iran are protesting for Black Lives Matter. I have friends in France, and she shows me pictures and videos of people protesting for Black Lives Matter. And she's constantly saying, like, France is with you. You have the support of France. You have the support of Belgium. You have all these countries that can clearly see what the times are calling for. And they can clearly see who is being oppressed. But we still have people here today that can't accept it, or they don't want to get educated, or they don't want to learn, or when they do learn, they want to look the other way. And I think that's what the worst injury of all is, to know what's happening but choose to look the other way. And I think that's what it's like to live with an open secret. The elephant in the room, the open secret is when we know that this thing is so-called a secret, everybody knows about it, but so many people refuse to acknowledge that it's there. And I think that's the worst injury of all, is to stay silent and to ignore.
Christopher, you know, it was the blatant kind of nonchalance that the officer had on his face when he murdered George Floyd. And that's the mindset that I fear that's going on a lot right now, and the mindset of our leaders, our president right now. It feels that's sort of what's being saying, that's okay. This is okay. And I think that's what resonated so much around the world, was this is not okay. And this has to end. And I feel like it not just woke up, but everybody saw that incredible blatant sense of like privilege and disdain, and it had to be addressed. And so the world, all over the world, I mean, it's huge. And so the statue, what made you do the petition? What, I know that there was the Columbus College, City College statue that was coming down. Did that inspire you? Was that part of it? Or what's the timeline? How did it work for you?
Well, what happened was I had enough of just everything you're describing. And, you know, you want to do something. You want to challenge the powers that be. You want to make a statement and say enough is enough. And if you say that you really believe in equality and you really want to address systemic racism and persistent racism, which is what the mayor said, if you really want to address these things, then you can't hold up symbols that represent these things. So if you really mean what you say, you're going to take tangible action to show that you mean what you say. So I was actually at work and I was on my lunch break, and I said, I'm going to make a petition. I'm going to make a petition, and I'm just going to do something, and I'm going to get it out there, because I can't stay silent. Because working in therapy and counseling and social work, I'm very familiar with the power that symbols have with people. You know, they evoke certain feelings, they evoke certain emotions. They can bring us back to a time and a place that we don't want to be. They can bring up horrible memories. They can bring up feelings of depression and anxiety and make us feel like we're being trampled all over again. And I know the power that these symbols have. So how can we continue to hold up these symbols that evoke so much negativity and oppression? So I went ahead during my lunch hour and made this petition on June 9th. And I just put it on social media on my Facebook and encourage people to read it, sign, and share. And 24 hours later, there were over 700 signatures on that petition. And I was like, wow. I don't think I knew that there would be 700 supporters in 24 hours time. But you know, it was great. I was like, I knew that I was not the only one that felt this way. Yeah. People needed a way to express it as well. And I think in times like change, people need an outlet. People need to know that there is an avenue that they can use to be able to speak out as well. So I'm glad that this petition became that avenue for so many people, so that they were able to address what they had been feeling and grappling with for however long they were grappling with it too. A couple days later, I think June 12th, 11th or 12th, I got a message from NBC4, and they wanted to do an interview with me on the news. So that afternoon, I did an interview with them and explained the petition and told them much of the history of what you shared about what Columbus did to the people and the atrocities that he committed. And they aired that. And a couple of days later, this petition got over 1,200 signatures, over 1,500 signatures. And then it was announced that Columbus State was developing a committee to review where their statue of Christopher Columbus stands in regards to the dialogue and to the present circumstances in the community. And is this statue representative to them as a school? And then it was announced that they were going to remove their statue. And as soon as they announced they were going to remove their statue, I sent an email out to supporters, which at this point was over about 2,500 supporters. And this was about 9 days total in between launching the petition and the mayor of Columbus announcing that they were going to remove the statue of Christopher Columbus in front of City Hall. And I thought, and I hoped, I said, if Columbus State can take theirs down, that will be great momentum. And we can use that to bring that to the mayor and City Hall's attention. And as soon as they announced that, I wrote the mayor and I wrote City Hall, every single city council member, and said Columbus State has shown tremendous leadership and an example of recognizing the power that these symbols have and reinforcing systemic racism. And I'm wanting to know, when are you going to take a stand and follow suit? Mm-hmm. And 2 days later, the mayor announced that Columbus would be parting ways with the statue of Christopher Columbus in front of City Hall. Wow. So it really happened. I didn't realize that it would happen so fast, but I think something that also happened that added to the immediacy of it mm-hmm. was that in the background of this conversation, other statues, not just of Confederate soldiers or monuments, but other statues of Christopher Columbus were coming down. People were vandalizing these other statues. They were being thrown into rivers. They were being beheaded. Mm-hmm. And I think Columbus was being forced with a reckoning that, wait a minute, this can happen here too.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to be on the news for taking a stand in leadership, or do we want to be on the news because we became another city that this happened with?
Right.
So regardless of the motivation, I'm glad that the right thing is being done.
Well, your petition isn't super long, Christopher. Sometimes those petitions can be really long, and yours is really concise and clear. And you made a statement that you didn't want to erase history, and that you didn't need these statues to be demolished. What were your hopes? What are your hopes? Or at least what you accept as far as what to do with these statues?
Yeah, I am a big history fan, and I'm always reading history. I'm always watching something having to do with history. I was watching the History Channel back when they actually showed history shows and not just reality shows. But I still catch it from time to time. So I very much so am a firm believer in learning from history and looking to the past to help give guidance to the present and to the future. Yeah. And so what my petition was calling for was for these statues, and well, it was two-part for me. I knew that this statue in front of City Hall was a gift from Genoa, Italy. So I'm thinking about diplomatic relationships. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about these long-standing, generations-long relationships that are in play here. So I'm being aware of that. I'm also being aware of the fact that we need an opportunity to not just erase history like Columbus erased the history of the indigenous people on this side of the world, but we needed an opportunity to educate people. We needed an opportunity to bring these things to light so that we can actually learn about them in the right context without glorifying and memorializing the man himself. So those things were at the forefront of what I was calling for. And I still would like to see them used in an educational setting. So what I had actually also done was I reached out to the Ohio History Connection, the History Museum. And I reached out to them immediately after I created the petition.
Oh, you did?
And took it upon myself to just reach out to them and say, look, I just created a petition. I would like this work to be used in an exhibit or in an educational setting to provide the right context for learning and teaching young future residents and kids, and so that we can learn this full history here. It is a part of Ohio history, but context is extremely important. So my understanding right now is the City Hall statue is going to be placed into storage until it's decided what will be done with it.
Did they reach back out to you from the Ohio Historical Society or the History Connection yet? Did they reach back out?
I don't believe, I haven't received anything. I'm sure they were quite surprised by my email. I'm sure they were quite surprised and were quite surprised to see all of this take place in such a quick fashion. So, but I hope that they are in dialogue. I know that my petition also called for the statue to be replaced with a work of art that is representative of everyone here, representative of diversity, representative of hope, representative of what we feel is the best in Columbus, something that we need to live up to, something that we need to aspire to. So I'm very interested to see what, that was something that the mayor called for as well. He had a lot of good ideas. I don't know where he got them all from.
It looks like he read your petition. It sounds like you read it. And it sounded like the people from Columbus State read your petition too, in their words.
Yeah, it sounds like they read it. Honestly, I'm just glad that voices over generations have finally been heard. You know, the time, it's literally has been generations, it's been years, it's been many, many, many people who have sought to change the way, you know, history is being made right now.
Yeah. And
they've been wanting to change the way we look at each other. They've been wanting to change the way we look at history. It's funny to think of it this way, but the way we look at history does have an effect on how we look at each other. And if we look at it, if we look at history with truth and understanding and seeing people as people going through tremendous odds and heartbreak, I think that can add to our ability to empathize with people right here and now and care about how people treat each other in the future.
I'm with you, Christopher. What do you think? If we take down the statues, do we change our name? Do you have any names that Columbus? I mean, really, I'm open to it. And my husband and I were talking about them. What ideas have you thought of?
I'm very much so against Flavortown.
You're very much what?
I'm very much so against Flavortown.
Okay, Flavortown, yeah.
Very much so against that. I feel like that is, me personally, I feel like that's a joke that got really out of hand. And I feel like it also but it does discredit and deflect and take away from the power of this movement that is taking place right now. So I don't want to see the future, if there is a future name of this city, I don't want it to, oh, where are we going? Flavortown. I mean,
no,
I don't want to disrespect the future or the present sacrifices that people are making. You're talking about people here in the city who being roughed up and maced and a person passed away from complications. How can we disrespect their memory and the work of everybody doing this right now? So that's just where I come from with it. Some people have mentioned Tecumseh or, Scioto or, different names, or even Franklin, just calling it Franklin, Ohio, things like that. If I were to pick a name, I would probably want a name that reflects the indigenous population, or a name that reflects someone that really worked for bringing people together, not tearing people apart. So it's kind of funny to feel like we are at this place of renaming a city, because when I started I was interviewed by Channel 4 twice, and the second time it was a different interviewer, and they said, people are talking about renaming the city, and are you calling for that? And at the time I thought, well, maybe, but I wanted to do one step at a time first, because I wanted to see if the statue was going to come down. I thought I was going to have to be in it for the long haul. I thought it was going to be a long fight. So
Yeah.
I was really just getting myself geared up and ready to just focus on this issue right there and then. But yeah, I mean, I love the story of Tecumseh. I've read about it, seen the outdoor theater show production many times, even as a kid. It's a beautiful, heroic, incredible story, and it signifies people standing up for what is right, and courage, and love, and family, and community. All these things are represented in that story.
Hey, Chris, that's our time. And thank you so much. I also love the name Tecumseh. And I think that's a conversation that we'll continue as former Columbus folks will converse. I appreciate your time. And I know the listeners of Grassroot, Ohio will be so happy to hear your story. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been really a pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.